So you want to get into riding motorcycles and you have no idea where to begin? Well, we put together a list video for you. These are the top beginner bikes you can buy brand new at a dealership in 2023. And we have a top pick from each category: adventure, scrambler, cruiser, sport, naked, dual sport, and even a bonus.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, there are tons and tons of great beginner motorcycles out there, a lot of which are bikes that you would buy used. But this is a list of things that you can go check out brand new at a dealership that might be worth considering. And the list starts with adventure bikes.
Yeah, we'll jump into adventure bikes in a sec, but I think that's an interesting point. A used motorcycle is a great place to start too, but there's a lot of people out there that want a warranty, want to be able to take it back to a dealer for service and have someone to go to for all their questions.
Yeah, and they want to be sure that it's going to ride well. There's not going to be anything wrong with it. It won't have been abused or sold for some reason that means that something is wrong with the bike. So
at some point we might do a list video of top used beginner motorcycles. These are the new ones. Let's start with the adventure bikes.
That would be the BMW 310 GS. That is our pick for a great adventure bike to start you out on. We live here in Colorado. There's obviously a lot of off-road terrain and even just fun dirt roads and fire roads that you could go ride. Cool thing about this BMW 310 GS, one of my favorite things about it, is that pricing, MSRP, $5,695 for a brand new bike.
Yeah, for a brand new BMW bike too, and I think that's huge. BMW is a brand that a lot of people associate with quality and, a luxury motorcycle, a great bike to go explore the mountains, especially here in Colorado.
Yeah, and another good thing about it is it's a small displacement bike, 313cc, 34 horsepower, and 20 pound-feet of torque. It's a liquid-cooled single cylinder. So it's a simple engine. It's not a crazy amount of power. It does have a 6-speed transmission, which is nice for an entry-level bike. 7.1 inches of suspension travel, so a decent amount of travel if you do want to take it on some rougher roads. 386-pound curb weight, so it's not especially heavy. And the seat height is 32.8 inches, which is taller than a lot of other category bikes, but for an adventure bike, it's really not bad.
Yeah, we put the weights and seat heights in pretty much all of these bikes you're going to see on this list, and we don't always do that, but for a beginner, seat height and weight are two important specs you want to be looking at. You want to feel comfortable on the bike and feel like you can maneuver it around the parking lot in tight spaces, not be overwhelmed. And you also want to be able to get your feet on the ground comfortably and not have to do like a shimmy off to the side of the seat where you plant one foot at a red light.
This bike also has ABS, great thing to have for a beginner bike. And there's a few honorable mentions that we'll list in each of these categories because there's tons and tons of bikes out there that are really, really good to start out on. A couple other bikes that we thought of in this category would be a bike like the Versys 300, actually has a slightly lower seat height, another really great option in this category to start out with. Also, the Honda CB500X, which is a motorcycle that we spent a good amount of time with, year and a half ago probably?
Yeah, we have a lot of videos on this. We did like a ride down to Denver. We brought it up to the Revzilla ADV Fest. I did like a rider's training course on it, which if you're thinking about buying one of these as your first bike, go watch that rider training course video we did with it, because that really gives you an idea of how you can use a smaller adventure bike like this to really work on your skills and develop your riding skills, become a better rider. So two really good choices. And as is going to be the case with all these categories, there's other bikes out there. We're not saying the other ones aren't good beginner bikes. These are the ones we would go for if we were shopping in that category for a beginner bike.
Our personal favorites. And speaking of personal favorites, we have next a category that I like a lot. This is a Scrambler motorcycle. So similar to an ADV, you have a slightly more rugged style of bike than your standard street bike. And for this category, we picked the Royal Enfield Scram 411. This is another very affordable bike with an MSRP at $5,099, even less expensive than that BMW we were just talking about. 411cc, 24 horsepower, and 24 pound-feet of torque, air-cooled single-cylinder engine with a 5-speed transmission. So pretty old-school setup there. Very, very simple engine and powertrain, and not a lot of horsepower, but decently torquey for its displacement. and it's just a really cool looking bike.
Yeah, the look of this is the reason you would buy it. Like you said, Scramblers, they're more rugged street bikes. They're somewhere in between an adventure bike and a street bike, but they're happier on the road than they are out on the trail. Sure, you can do some mild trails with them. They've got knobby tires, but you're really buying it for the look, and this absolutely kills it in the styling department for just over $5,000. Low seat height again, 31.3 inches, does have ABS, so it's got the things you want to keep you safe on the road as a beginner, but pretty simple, bare bones, no riding modes or anything like that. It's just air-cooled and basic.
And some decent specs, too, on this bike. It also has 7 inches of travel, weighs about 408 pounds, so it's not a lightweight motorcycle, but it's not crazy heavy. Also, if you're shopping for your first motorcycle, don't let anybody make you feel bad about picking out a motorcycle that looks good. Because, sure, you could go purely for function, but at the end of the day, if you want to ride a lot, you probably want to ride a bike that appeals to you. And if you can pick a motorcycle like this, for example, that excites you when you walk up to it, there's a good chance that you're going to spend more time riding it, become a better rider in the end. So picking a motorcycle that has good looks is 100% valid.
Yeah. And that's why, so for this category, our honorable mention is the Husqvarna Sparkpillen 401. Same thing there. This is one of my favorite motorcycle designs out there right now because it's just so unlike anything else out there.
Really cool.
The bodywork on this is nuts. It's got a really cool headlight design. And yeah, you don't see them a ton. I've seen only a handful of them. Yeah, like you said, pick something that appeals to you design-wise because that's going to make you go out to your garage, throw your riding gear on, and take it out on the road.
Now, for the next segment, another segment of motorcycle that I personally like a lot is the Cruiser. And for this, we went with the Honda Rebel 300. And this is the entry-level Honda Rebel. 286cc single-cylinder, 6-speed transmission. So, again, a pretty good amount of gears for an entry-level bike. Another really nice thing here, 27.2-inch seat height. One of the great things about Cruisers, very low seat heights, so this is going to be a super approachable motorcycle.
Yeah, super manageable. You can get your feet down. Anybody can get their feet down on one of these, which is really cool. And only 364 pounds wet, so very lightweight as well. And an interesting thing about the Rebel, not so much the new Rebel, but for decades, MSF courses were using Honda Rebels small displacement Rebels to train people how to ride and get their licenses. So if anything tells you what's a good beginner bike, it's the bikes they use in the MSF classes, and this is that. The other thing I really like about it is Honda makes 3 different Rebels. They make the 300, the 500, and the 1100. And they all look the same. If you don't really know motorcycles, you don't know what engine to look for. Some people with a 300 and an 1100 parked next to each other might not even know that there's a difference in the bike. So I like that the small displacement bike looks just like the big one. And if it's a line of bikes you really like, you could start on the 300, work your way up to the 500 a year or two later, and then eventually go for the full-on 1100.
Yeah, and if you're looking at a 300, these are also very affordable bikes. At the very baseline, it's $4,749 MSRP without ABS. But for a starter bike, highly recommend getting one with ABS. It's only $5,049, a couple hundred extra bucks. It's definitely worth that. Another side note, too, another honorable mention is the fact that the Rebel 500 is available with a DCT so that you don't have to operate a clutch. Now, I think we both encourage anybody out there who's trying to learn how to ride a motorcycle to take on the challenge of learning how to use a clutch. It's really not that difficult to do. But if that's a huge headache for you, if that's a barrier to entry to getting into motorcycles for you, then it's a good option having that Rebel 500 with a DCT, and it's $6,449. So it's not that much more expensive than one of the Rebel 300s.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I don't think a little more displacement going to 500 is a terrible call for a beginner rider. I think as long as you're responsible enough and you know what you're riding, anyone can handle any bike, really. Moving on to the sport category. So Case is kind of the cruiser guy. I'm more of the sport guy. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit here, and Case will shut up, I bet, for a second. The Ninja 400 is our pick for a sport bike. Small displacement, same thing as the Rebel, though. It looks just like the bigger displacement Kawasaki sport bikes. Maybe not so much the new ZX-10s, but it looks like a smaller ZX6R, basically. And I really like that. So you're getting a 399cc parallel twin, assist and slipper clutch, makes 44 horsepower and 24 pound-feet of torque. That's according to published reports. 30.9-inch seat height, so nowhere as close to as low as the Rebel, but still pretty low, especially for a fully fared sport bike. And it weighs 366 pounds wet.
So another one of the important things that we tried to make sure on this list is that these bikes were all relatively affordable, even though they're brand new. And this is no exception. MSRP on this is $52.99 without ABS, but once again, it's worth getting ABS, $56.99 to get it. And that's not that big of a premium.
No, I don't think so. It's usually on all these bikes, it's a couple $100 to go with ABS, and I always recommend that for a new rider. Even myself, I always like a bike with ABS.
His first track bike was one of the other motorcycles that's on our honorable mentions in this list, the KTM RC390, and that's a small, lightweight enough bike that you can develop some really incredible cornering skills on the track with one of these bikes.
Yeah, I really miss my RC390. I ride an R6 on the track now, and it is a hell of a lot bigger, a hell of a lot heavier.
Much more of a handful.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, it's fun, but there's something really fun about riding an RC390 and passing Tuonos, when you're coming into a corner super hot. So yeah, RC390. We also have the Honda CBR 500R on this list, which is a bike we've spent a lot of time with, and it's comfortable, and it looks really good too. So I mean, great beginner bikes, and obviously the way they're used on the track, both the Ninja 400, the RC390, a little bit the CBR 500R, people are using them as track bikes too. So this could be a bike you buy as your first bike, and then buy another bike when you're ready to get into something faster, and keep the first bike and turn it into a track bike. That's
exactly, and then become a really good rider.
Yeah, there you go.
Now,
let's move on to the nakeds.
Yeah, next on for the naked bikes, we have our pick as the Yamaha MT-03, 321cc parallel twin, so one of the few bikes on this list that's not a single cylinder, and it's the same color scheme as the MT-07, the 09, the MT-10, so kind of like a lot of the other bikes that we included on this list, it doesn't look like a small motorcycle. It doesn't look like something for a beginner. It looks like a full-on bike.
Exactly.
It is.
It is a full-on bike. It's small displacement, but all these bikes kind of follow that same formula. They look like they're bigger brothers, and it gives you something to aspire towards, something to get to. You still get KYB forks, inverted forks on this bike. ABS is standard across all models, and pretty low seat height, 30.7 inches, and Yamaha claims 56 miles per gallon. So with the naked upright position and that fuel economy figure, this could be a great commuter and also a fun weekend toy.
Absolutely. Also weighs 373 pounds, so it's a lightweight bike, and at $4,999 MSRP, not especially expensive. So you get a lot of really nice equipment on this bike, and it's not that expensive. So a fantastic option if you want to get into motorcycling.
Our honorable mentions for this are the Kawasaki Z400, which I think is a killer looking bike. And then we also put the Suzuki SV650 on this list because we would hear it from all you guys in the comments if the SV650 didn't make the list of top beginner bikes. So
yeah, it's generally considered a very good motorcycle to start off on. It is bigger displacement than most of the bikes on this list. I mean, with any bike on this list, you need to understand what you're getting into and be comfortable, all that. But this is a bigger displacement bike, so it's going to be more for you to manage going down the road.
Yeah, totally. Moving on to the dual sports. This is one that we didn't do a news video on a couple of weeks ago when it was first announced, but this is one you definitely want to know about, and it's Honda's new very small displacement dual sport, which is the XR150L.
Yeah, this is a new bike that they came out with part of the reason that we're doing this list, just because it strikes us as a really good motorcycle to have as a beginner bike. And the other reason that we're doing this list too is that a really great article on Jalopnik came out about the best new 2023 motorcycles for beginners in the US market. So we decided, we would chime in on the same category as well. And this XR150L that's coming out from Honda, one of the really impressive things about it is the price. The MSRP is $2,971, so easily the least expensive on this list. Also the smallest displacement at 149 cc. It's an air-cooled single cylinder. It's carbureted, and it's a 5-speed transmission, so it's pretty old school, but it's also very affordable.
There's a lot of bikes that are still carbureted that we complain about, and we're like, why won't they update this bike and make it fuel injected? It's not too often you see a brand new model come out in 2023 that's carbureted, but that's how they keep the costs down. I mean, the Navi did that too. So, it's a very basic motorcycle, 7.1 inches of front suspension travel, 5.9 inches at the rear. Pretty tall seat height. This ties the BMW 310 GS that we started the list off with at 32.8 inches, but the weight is like non-existent, 282 pounds.
Yeah, this is easily the lightest weight motorcycle on the list. So even though it does have a seat height on the taller side, because it's so light, it's going to be fairly approachable. So an interesting offering from Honda, something that we're hoping to throw a leg over at some point soon. Another bike that we wanted to mention in a similar category, it's not exactly a dual sport, but it is dirt bike based, is the Kawasaki KLX 300 SM. So it's a supermoto version of the KLX.
Yeah, basically you take the KLX 300 dirt bike, take off the dirt tires, put on 17-inch wheels, 17-inch street tires, tune the suspension, re-gear it a little bit, and that's what they came out with the KLX 300 SM. I rode it out in California on a really windy road and had like the best time on it. I just loved this bike. And then one of my buddies here in Denver bought one to teach his girlfriend how to ride on. So great beginner bike. And same thing with that. For him, my friend Anwar, I don't know, he might be watching this video. It was a dual purpose bike for him. It was a small displacement bike that he could teach his girlfriend to ride on, and it was a small displacement bike he could take to the go-kart track, IMI, which we do a lot of videos at, and he could use it there as well.
Yeah, it's got a lot of advantages being dirt bike based. It's lightweight, and it's a motorcycle that doesn't really mind being dropped on the ground.
Yeah.
So those are all good things. And now, as a bonus, for this list, I'll preface by saying we wanted to mostly include bikes that are fairly happy on the highway, look like full-size regular motorcycles, not something that looks like it came out of a cereal box. But we can't do a list of bikes that are good to learn on without mentioning our classic, of course, mini motos, stuff like the Grom, the Monkey, the Navi, the Ruckus of Z125, Benelli TNT 135, the Trail 125,
Super Cub. Yeah.
Bikes like those, they're not great on the highway, and you can tell that they're smaller than regular motorcycles. So it's kind of a little bit of a different category, but motorcycles like those are fantastic for you to learn how to use, especially something like a Grom or a Monkey or the TNT 135 or a Z125. Those are motorcycles where you will learn how to use a clutch, you'll learn how to shift gears, you'll learn how to properly ride a motorcycle just on something that is extra small.
Yeah, I mean, all the controls, the way you operate them is exactly the same as on a full-size motorcycle. Everything's just shrunken down, easier to manage, and everything happens at a slower speed. So it's easier to ride, and it's more approachable too. There's a fair number of people, I think, that just the size of a full-size bike would intimidate them, but then you walk up to something like a Monkey and they're like, oh, yeah, that's cute, I'll ride that. That doesn't scare me at all.
Very approachable, although I will say, while most of those mini motos hover around the $4,000 range, most of the bikes that we listed on this list are not that much more expensive. So if you want to get a motorcycle that you can grow into, there's a lot to be said for going with one of the bikes that was on our main list or any of the honorable mentions.
There's also a lot to be said for a mini bike, though, as a first bike, because let's say something like the MT-03 or a Ninja 400. pick any bike on this list. You ride it for a couple years and you're probably going to get tired of it at some point and want something a little quicker, and you might sell it off. Not to say that that's going to happen to everyone, but with a mini moto, you might ride it for a few years and then keep it in your garage as a second bike.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people that have been riding for decades that have some of their most fun on a mini bike.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, our guy, Andy Smith, he is somebody who trains people how to ride motorcycles, and he trains people at all levels. He did tons of racing back in his day, and he has the most fun on mini bikes out of everything. You know, he's kind of shown us the light. We feel the same way. Some of our best times that we have are on small bikes. So yeah, there is something to be said for learn how to ride on a small bike that you'll still want to keep around when you then decide to move on to something that's maybe more like a 600 or 700 or maybe down the road even a liter bike.
Yeah. So there you go. There's our list of best new motorcycles that are best for beginners. You can buy brand new at a dealership. Head down to the comments and let us know. I really am curious to read through and find out what your first motorcycle was.
Yeah.
So drop us a comment. That'll start a fun conversation down there. I want to see what everyone's first bike was. I'll even put a comment down there and let everyone know what my first bike was. And yeah, we'll catch you in the next video.